All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to peel back the layers on something that shapes pretty much everything we do, a lot of times without us even noticing. We're talking about the law, those unseen rules that give us the order, the rights, and the sense of justice our societies are built on. So let's get into it and see how this whole thing works. Think about it for a second. A car crash, a big political scandal blowing up on the news, or even just a brand new iron you bought that's completely dead on arrival. I mean, these feel like totally separate, random problems, right? Well, they're not. They all point to one fundamental thing. We need a system to create some order out of all this potential chaos. And that system? That's the law. So, to get our heads around this huge topic, we've broken it down into 5 key parts. First, we'll look at why we even have laws. Then we'll get into the 2 main types, find out where they come from, understand the rights they give you, and finally, what you can actually do when those rights are broken. Okay, so let's tackle that first big question. Why do we need law in the first place? Well, like we just saw with the car crashes and broken stuff, life can get messy and fast. The law is basically the framework, the very foundation of order that keeps everything from just falling apart. So here's the official definition. At its core, it's a set of rules that can actually be enforced by the courts. And what's really powerful here is just how wide-reaching it is. It's not just about cops and robbers. No, it's the contract you sign for your phone, it's the safety rules for the bus you ride every day, and it's the rule that says, hey, you can't just build a fence in your neighbor's yard. It touches almost every single interaction we have. All right, let's move on to the most basic split in the entire legal world. Seriously, if you get the difference between criminal and civil law, you're already halfway to understanding what's going on in any legal situation. And this breaks it down perfectly. On one hand, you've got criminal law. Think of this as a wrong against society as a whole, against the state. That's why it's the state that goes after the person. The goal? Punish them and keep the peace for everyone else. Then, on the other hand, you have civil law. This is all about disputes between private people or companies. The goal here isn't jail. It's to fix the problem, to make things right again, usually with money. Okay, pop quiz time. Let's see if you're with me. Here's the deal. Ted buys a steam iron. It's a dud. And the store says, tough luck, no refund. So, should Ted call the police, or is this something else? Criminal or civil? What do you think? If you said civil law, ding, 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 you are absolutely right. This is a classic civil case. It's a private argument between Ted and the shop about their rights. No crime was committed against society here. Okay, let's try one that's a little trickier. Barry's speeding, going way over the limit, and he hits a pedestrian, Iris, who gets hurt pretty badly. So what do we have here? Is it a criminal case or a civil one? And the answer is, it's both. See, the state is definitely going to go after Barry for the crime of dangerous driving. That's criminal law. But at the exact same time, Iris can sue Barry herself to get compensation for her medical bills and injuries, and that's a civil law case. One event, 2 totally different legal tracks. So we have all these rules, but where do they actually come from? I mean, they don't just appear out of thin air, right? There's a whole blueprint for how laws get made. Let's take a look. The best way to think about this is like a pyramid. At the very top, the peak, you have the Constitution. This is the master rule book. No other law is allowed to break the rules in here. Underneath that, you have legislation. These are all the specific laws passed by Parliament, things like the Penal Code or the Computer Crimes Act. And then at the very bottom, you have judicial decisions, where judges' rulings in actual cases can set powerful new examples or precedents for everyone else to follow. Now, this idea of judicial precedent is a huge deal. It basically means that when a high court makes a decision on something, every lower court then has to follow that same decision in future cases that are similar. It's the system's way of ensuring the law is consistent and predictable. It's like saying, hey, we've already figured this out once, so that's the rule from now on. But, and this is a really cool little detail, not everything a judge says in a courtroom becomes law. You have to know the difference between 2 parts of their decision. First, there's the ratio decidendi. That's just a fancy Latin way of saying the reason for the decision. This is the core legal logic, the why. And that part is binding. It creates the precedent. But then there's the obiter dicta, which means things said by the way. You can think of this as the judge's extra thoughts or comments. They might be smart, but they're not legally binding. So it's the reason, not the ramble, that really matters. Okay, so we've talked about law as a bunch of rules to keep order, but now let's talk about how it connects directly to you. Because the law isn't just a rule book, it's also supposed to be your shield, and it does that by giving you fundamental rights. So, what makes a right fundamental? I mean, what's the big deal? Well, this quote absolutely nails it. They're the rights that are so important, they're literally locked into the Constitution, that supreme law of the land we talked about. This makes them incredibly hard to change. They have special armor. And here are just some of those big ones, the core freedoms from Sri Lanka's constitution. We're talking about your freedom to speak your mind, to gather peacefully, to form groups like trade unions, to practice your religion, to choose your job, and to travel freely around the country. These aren't just nice ideas. They are the protected pillars of a free society. But, and you knew there was going to be a but, right? These rights are not a free-for-all. They aren't absolute. The law is smart enough to know that your individual freedom has to be balanced with the needs of the whole community. So yeah, your rights can be legally limited for really specific and important reasons, like protecting national security or making sure there's public order. And that brings us to our final and maybe our most critical section. I mean, it's great to have all these rights on paper, but what happens when someone, especially the government, steps over the line and violates them? How do you make those rights real? This quote just gets right to the point. What good is a right if there's no way to enforce it? It's just a nice suggestion at that point. Totally meaningless. For your rights to be real, there has to be a system, a piece of machinery to make them stick. And the good news is that machinery exists. The Constitution itself gives us the tool. In Sri Lanka, it gives the Supreme Court the one and only power to hear cases when a citizen says their fundamental rights were violated by the government. It's a direct line to the highest court in the land to get justice. So, we've seen it all. The law creates order, it defines what's right and wrong, and it hands us these powerful protections, along with a way to enforce them. The whole system is there, the tools are on the table. But that leaves us with one final big question to think about. Who has the duty to actually pick up those tools, to be vigilant, and to make sure that these rights aren't just words on a page, but a real lived experience for everyone?